Welcome, everybody, to the second edition of Coffee Break. Your hosts today are Mary and Jeff.
Today we're talking about food.
How about that?
At Jeff's suggestion, because
I'm an expert.
said himself he has some odd preferences with food.
Yeah, it's just that I'm much older than Mary. You probably wouldn't tell just by listening to my voice. But there are a number of years there. So I grew up in an age where nobody cared. You just had processed foods, and let's have some more salami.
Well, I did want to touch on that because you grew up with parents who were immigrants to this country, correct?
Yes.
And I'm curious what family meals were like for you growing up as a child. And
interesting question, but the way it was I was born to German people, a German mother and father that had just come to the United States right after the war, like 1948. And their idea of food was a winter meal all the time. Schnitzel, bratwurst, red cabbage, hot dogs, and all of that processed type of meat that people ate. So even if it was 100 degrees outside, we would have mashed potatoes and goulash and just stuff that was filling, but not particularly healthy. Nobody knew about health. Everyone was just happy to be alive and have a plate in front of them. Nobody cared about whether something had gluten in it or didn't.
Right,
So,
it was more eating to live more so than living to eat.
Right, it was stick to your ribs type of food, and I enjoyed it, and I grew up with that. But now it's a whole different smoke, the way we raise our children.
It is a very different situation because also with social media, you have everybody commenting on people's food choices and.
Yeah,
there's a little more pressure there to
and the way
feed your
foods
kids
are
the
marketed. I seem to have existed a long time on unhealthy food, and I actually miss some processed foods. Give me some nitrates, which brings up a kind of a funny anecdote about death by salami, which
it's not something everybody hears about or knows
no,
about.
And I would like to share this little aside, and you might find yourself nodding in agreement, because all of us have kind of like secret eating habits where you eat something where your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend or friend or significant other, you don't want them to see what you're eating because it's so bad, but it's so good. And you do it alone, usually at night when they're asleep or in another room. So this particular anecdote goes back to me running out to the supermarket and getting a few staples and then also buying a half a pound of hard salami, which I love, but is so bad for you on so many levels. And I figured I have from Stop and Shop to my house, which is approximately 7 minutes, I have to eat a half a pound of salami in 7 minutes before I walk in with the rest of the groceries. So, and I have my dog in the back seat of the car, a chocolate lab in case you were wondering. And as I'm driving down my road, which is a long, straight road, I'm feeling, I hear a noise in my ears as I'm eating the salami quickly. And it sounded like a buzzing noise, and then I passed out. And my car went up onto the neighbor's lawn and bounced onto the neighbor's lawn, not more than 10 more feet before I would have hit the house. And my eyes opened and I stopped the car. And
was your neighbor home?
My neighbor was home, and I got out of the car and I said, I'll take care of the ruts in the grass. And my neighbor dismissed it as being nothing, and I continued home. And when I told my wife what had happened, she thought I had a mini stroke. So she wanted to go to the hospital. I didn't, because we were having friends over later that day. I did not tell her that I ate a half a pound of salami. So, so the next day I did go to the hospital, and they have all these tests to tell whether you've had these many strokes, and they couldn't find anything. They said, you're healthy. I don't know what caused it. Just go home and have a good life. And my wife, being a kind of a sleuth detective, food detective, kept asking me what was going on before I got home. And I admitted I ate a half pound of salami, to which she looked up what that does to the body. And here's the takeaway. So get your pencils ready, because this could happen to you. If you have blood pressure medicine, which I was on, and you eat a lot of salami, which has a lot of nitrates, that lowers your blood pressure even more. So if you're on blood pressure medicine and you have salami, you could actually pass out. And they actually have a term for it. You could look it up. Suicide by salami. And she found that, and she said it's actually a medical term. People kill themselves by eating too much salami. And I did it unknowingly, but it is, I don't eat it anymore because I don't want to die.
I was just going to ask, do you still sneak a bite?
Only at weddings, when they have the rolled salami on a plate.
That's not enough to,
right.
I would hope.
It's right. I actually had it recently at our colleague's wedding up in Newport, Rhode Island, where I had a bunch of salami. But
that's a nice moment for you.
It was, and I knew I wasn't driving. I was just going to go
slightly living on the edge.
Hotel, and if I did pass out, I'd pass out in bed, not in my car.
Everyone's getting drunk, and you're just eating
totally.
Salami.
So, when you cook a meal, do you actually have a planned menu of so it would be a balanced meal?
I'm more of one of those. You ever watch the show Chopped?
Yes.
Yeah. So I kind of live like that. Like,
okay.
To a point, I'll plan a general meal of what I want to make and hope that there's some sort of, balance of vegetables and protein involved. But usually it's, okay, what do we have and what can I make out of this?
So you don't, at the beginning of the week, make out a list for the supermarket where you have meals in your head saying, on Tuesday we're going to have spaghetti, on Wednesday we're going to have a pork chop, and on Thursday we're going to have this.
I wish I could be that way. I wish, but I can never do it. So we're more of, okay, you get a bunch of things at the grocery store that you can make multiple things with. And then we see how the week goes.
So every day is kind of like a surprise for the kids and Ryan.
It is a little bit. I mean, not too much of a surprise because children only eat so many things. But
right.
So there's only so many options. But, usually I try to get some new foods in there, but I usually have to have some sort of option on the plate that I know they'll eat too, even if it is just bread or applesauce.
Well,
which kind of brings me back to the mention of you having your specific food preferences still. Like, what are some of those examples that you think?
Well, nothing, for the healthy stuff, it's chicken Kiev and meatloaf and spaghetti and meatballs. That's
those are your hearty meals.
Yeah, the hearty meals. Like if my wife said, hey, we're going to have, and I urge the listening audience to not drift off now, because I know this is going into a place where you're going, really? There's a podcast about this? That's ridiculous. But we're going to try to bring it back and to make it more exciting. But
I mean, it's been pretty exciting. You almost died by salami.
Died by salami.
But I guess I'm just thinking things like you have your preference for always having ice in your drinks, and you like your flour tortillas at Mexican restaurants.
Mexican got to have a flour tortilla, know. And that brings up going out. Like I eat out twice a week, and it's a function of, I want to take some of the burden off my wife from having to cook every single day.
Because you don't cook at all, right?
Only a fried egg in the morning.
Okay.
No one makes a better fried egg than me, and toast. But I'm completely challenged. If I had to make scrambled eggs, I wouldn't even know how to do that, which is really pathetic. But a good fried egg is a happy moment for me. But mostly if we have to talk about 3 meals a day, the morning is the least, even though it's supposed to be the most important meal, it's the least intake for me because I'll just have yogurt and I'll have a piece of melon or some fruit. And then on the way to work, I might get a buttered roll. And I know there are others here that love that too.
That would be me.
That would be Mary. And that's breakfast. And lunch is usually a kind of a BLT. I'll have a sandwich where I always go to the deli.
And how do you order your BLT?
Well, it's kind of like a new shorthand. You know how you have BLT with bacon, lettuce, and tomato, but I'll have BLT on WT with 2 AC and LBOB, which if I had to describe it, is obviously BLT on white toast, WT, with 2 AC, 2 slices of American cheese, and LBOB with a little bit of butter. So they can almost put all those letters up there on the board, which is really kind of shocking, but it describes for me, the perfect BLT.
It is pretty good.
And then my wife will always ask me what I want for dinner as I'm walking out of the door in the morning, which is not the time to start thinking about meals. And I tell her, I'll call you. So, after all these years of marriage, by the way, folks, I've been married 53 years. The meals are so predictable that I can't even go there. It's going to be fish, or it's like salmon Alaska, where you cut the fish into little bite-sized pieces and put it in a sheet tray. Is that correct? Sheet tray, and some chopped onions and peppers, and you put it in 350 degrees for like.
So healthy.
It's so healthy, and it's so good, and the accompanying dish to the salmon is wild rice, which is expensive, but I have the best, or my wife has the best recipe for wild rice, because it fluffs up and it's long grain and it comes from Minnesota, and they get it in canoes by shaking the trees, and the rice just sits on top of the water and they scoop it up with these nets. And so it's naturally a more expensive process to harvest wild rice. So it can be $14 for a box that is only 4 ounces or 5 ounces.
For one meal.
Well, you can get 2 meals out of it.
Okay.
4 ounces or 5 ounces of wild rice is actually quite a bit. Rice fills up the box.
If you had the choice, would you pick for a meal a accompanying side of rice, potatoes, or pasta?
It would be rice. Rice is a good.
Interesting.
It's a starch. Wild rice, I don't even think, is it wild rice a starch? It's
Yeah.
It is.
Rice is low starch.
It's got to be a starch, but it's so different than white rice, and it's so healthy for you. So, nevertheless, everyone has a different set of meals that they love.
Sure. And do you think it's changed for you over time? Are you more set in your ways now with food than you were, or do you think it's...
Well, no, I'm less set because I'm exposed to different foods, because everyone here in the office, everyone's younger than me and everyone eats differently, but everyone seems to be foodies and healthy at that.
Well, that's more of a thing now. I feel like everybody's a foodie in some way.
Yeah, and instead of me being the stuck in a rut type of guy that's eating potatoes and meatloaf, I'll take a page out of everyone else's book and try to eat well. So are there foods that we in the office have put me
impacted you with?
Well, I have eaten a lot more chicken because of our colleague.
Our chicken friend.
So there's chicken this and there's chicken that. And then we have another person that actually posts food pictures with, I can't even pull up all the different types of foods that are all so very healthy. What would you think Elora's contribution has been to food. But another person here in the office.
Well, she makes lots of sweet treats too, but she
Yeah.
mixes some healthy things in there too.
Well, anyway, as far as food goes, there are a lot more options.
But
And
did you really eat chicken growing up? Probably more so.
I don't remember that.
Beef?
It was always meat. It was always some kind of schnitzel or rouladen or...
Yeah, because I'm reading here on the U.S. Department of Agriculture, they keep track of the trends in different foods. And the availability of chicken began its upward climb in the 1940s, overtaking pork availability in 1996.
Wow.
And surpassing beef in 2010 to become the meat most available for U.S. consumption.
Yeah, it was pork for me. It was pork
Yeah.
chops.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I grew up with that too.
so anyway, and breaded pork chops. See, that's not as healthy, but I love breaded pork chops. So if I go into a restaurant and they don't have breaded, I'm going to stay away from that. And
Even if it has like gravy and mashed potatoes, but not breaded.
there's
You
something
wouldn't
about
go
a
for that.
breaded pork chop that makes it complete to me.
Yeah, it's like a chicken cutlet too.
It's
to
like
me,
a chicken
yeah.
cutlet, right? Exactly. Do you like that too? No.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Would you bread something at home?
Chicken, yeah.
Okay. So you have the shake and bake stuff that you dip it
Well, I
in.
get the breadcrumbs and you
Right.
do the egg and the
Interesting,
flour.
huh?
Sometimes I skip the flour, but
Yeah, you don't have to have that. But,
Yeah. rarely. I mean, again, I'm not planning that much, so if I have the time to do it, maybe I will do it.
well,
But what were the vegetables you had as a side growing up?
well, everybody had, at least in my house, there was creamed spinach.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And not just spinach, but creamed spinach. There was broccoli, and there were those what are those round things that are roasted now, and they're burnt. They're
Brussels sprouts?
Brussels sprouts.
We got it.
Exactly. So
Oh, delicious.
they're delicious, absolutely. And
I love them now, but I think growing up I never would have touched
Never.
them.
But my mother made that burnt Brussels sprouts. And now if you go into a restaurant and they offer that, I get that. It's just
And they are more trendy now. I feel like.
and healthy, I would
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah.
I hope.
Yeah.
So, but it takes some doing to prepare burnt Brussels sprouts. I don't cook.
Well, now we have the air fryer.
Oh, right.
So that
So
does it quickly. So we can burn all the
Mary
Brussels
got a new
sprouts.
stove. and so she's proud of her
I mean, the air fryer is mostly for
the
frozen
range
foods.
of food she can now make quickly.
Yeah, all those chicken nuggets, just in a snap, they're done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
and-
But apparently now the most commonly consumed vegetables are potatoes and tomatoes, which makes sense because
Yeah.
you use those for French fries and pizza
And pizza and BLT.
and BSC.
Tomatoes an unfinished type of vegetable.
Tomatoes.
Tomatoes.
Would
right.
you eat one on its own fresh?
Not in a million years.
Me
If
neither.
somebody handed me a tomato, it would just sit there.
It's not my thing, but there's people who, those beefsteak tomatoes. they go
Beefsteak
wild.
tomatoes, when you have the mozzarella and the beefsteak slice,
Sure.
and that whatever that's called, and it's drizzled with some balsamic, that is a wonderful appetizer.
Delicious.
And I will.
Anything with cheese.
Well, there it is.
Which also, cheese now accounts for largest share of dairy cup equivalents in U.S. diets. It used to be milk.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Were you one of those families
We had
growing
milk.
up where you had to have milk at the table?
We were poor, so we didn't have milk all the time. We had mostly, you're not going to believe this, folks, water. Just water. A glass of ice water on the table with a pitcher so you could refill that water.
That's lovely.
But nobody had, my parents never had wine while they were eating dinner. Occasionally we would have milk, and I thought that was kind of special. But now I don't care for it because we've gone astray with regards to milk. We can't have milk anymore. It's got to be 1%, 2%, 3%, skim, goat, oat,
Almond. Yeah, there's a lot of milk.
almond. nobody knows anymore what's best. And for me to go into a Starbucks and order a cappuccino made with oat, which I didn't even know. You know how many oats you have to squeeze to get milk out of that thing? And I never get it for myself. I always get it for a colleague that loves oat milk. So it's bizarre. So I don't eat a lot of milk. Okay.
Well, I guess that's on trend.
Well, let me ask you this, Mary. When you get a quart or a gallon, and depends on how much milk your family drinks, is it 2%?
So we right now get whole milk for the kids
Oh.
because my youngest is under 2. So
I see.
they recommend that for brain development and getting all of those fats in there. I personally drink lactate milk because
You're lactose intolerant?
basically, yeah.
Really?
So-
So is Missy.
Yeah, so that makes it easier because I don't really like, I mean, I'll have an oat milk maybe, but I feel like, I don't know.
You can.
I like regular milk. It's better for my stomach if I
Got it.
have the lactate
Well,
kind.
that's good. That's good. I'm just asking out of ignorance, folks. I've never been to the supermarket and looked for a quart of oat milk, but they have that?
Sure, it's right by the other milks.
God. It says oat?
Yeah, and
O-A-T?
you can get oat half and half, I think. All of that stuff is there.
God. Well,
So many
What's
options.
it going to come to next?
And the other thing that's more of a popular item now is yogurt
Oh, I love
than
yogurt,
it
but
used to be. I feel like when you grew up, was yogurt a thing?
yeah, yogurt was not a thing at all. That came in when I grew up, which was, is in, let's just say, the early 50s. Yogurt was not a thing, or at least not something that my parents understood, so they didn't buy it. But I love it, but I love the unhealthy kind, which is made with whole milk. So if you go and you get, how do you pronounce F-A-G-E?
Oh, fage.
Fahi or
I think it's fage. Right?
You see how pathetic this little episode of Coffee Break is turning into. We don't know how to pronounce.
I mean, I can easily look
Fahi,
this up.
fudge, fudgy. But I get Dannon. Everyone understands that, whole milk and plain, not even vanilla. Faye, is that?
Faye.
And that's what my wife has, and will never switch. And I'll never switch from Dannon because it's just the best.
Okay.
It's very healthy. It's a
Yeah, I mean, yogurt's a great source of
So
calcium. So we do have a question submission for today,
okay.
which is on theme. Sometimes I think our questions will just come out of nowhere. But one of our colleagues submitted the question of if you could relive a meal from your life, the very time and place, what would it be? It could be like a family meal with a relative or something you ate on vacation.
I am ready for that question.
Oh, go ahead.
I am ready for that question. So, just so you guys know, everyone has a favorite kind of food, and everyone has a memory of growing up where your mother or just the family in general, if you have a grandmother, that usually plays a part in making meals. But in my family, it was just my mom. And being German, German food is a food that takes, the real good stuff takes 3 days to prepare. It's not a quick pull together type of food. The German kitchen is a complex, long, drawn-out kitchen. It's plain food. It's well done. The Jewish kitchen is very flavorful. The Spanish kitchen also takes quite a bit of time, paella, in order to make that dish. But everyone has a memory of some dish, whether it's a Jewish dish or a Spanish dish or a German dish, especially Italians. Give me the pasta and the meatballs and the sausage and all of that stuff. But I remember, to answer this question correctly, my mother would make something called Hefeklöße, which are yeast cakes. And if you can think of a small loaf of bread, not a normal loaf of bread that you see on these cooking pieces of wood that they slide into the oven, and then the loaf expands as it's cooking, and then they take it out, and it's ready to go. But this is all yeast cake. So think of a small loaf of bread in your mind, and think this is a 6 inches long by 4 inches high by 3 inches wide yeast loaf. And as the yeast expanded, it would have to sit on a piece of wood with a wet cloth over it for 3 days as the yeast
built up.
filled it up. And whenever my mother said, "Hey, we're going to have Hefeklöße," she announced it on a Monday, and we wouldn't have it until a Thursday.
Wow.
So you were just watching this little tray with, everyone had 2, by the way, Klöße. Everyone would have 2. So there's 4 in my family. So there's 8 of these things sitting on a tray with a wet kind of a towel, not really a towel, it's like a cloth over it, keeping it moist and the yeast growing. And then she would put it into the oven and she would cook it. And that was 3 hours. And then you took it out and she had this vanilla cream that she would pour over it, very much like a souffle. And you would eat this and your eyes would roll back in your head because it was so delicious.
Would it be one of those things where you'd get home from school and you'd smell
Oh God, it was so
being
great.
made and you'd be so excited?
But it ended on a bad note because we had this my whole life growing up before I left the house at 18 to go to college and never to return. And Germans don't care if you return. German families don't care. They're the least in. I'm going to say this for you Germans that are out there. Italian people can't get close enough to their kids. Irish people can't get close enough to the extended family, grandmothers.
Unless they're mad at each other.
Yeah, unless they're mad at each other. And it's just a wonderful thing. Spanish people respect the elders and have their grandparents living at home. German people, there's always a 2-foot space between you and the next relative, whether it's an immediate relative or a distant relative. You just can't, there's a space you have to maintain. You will not get close. So in our family, once I left at 18, nobody actually even cared and said, "Hey, when are you coming home?" That was never even a question. I would just be out there, hanging out with friends and making my own life. However, getting back to Hefeklöße, that was a sidebar that I probably upset a lot of people with. But my mother stopped making them when I was 15 because on that thin wooden tray, almost like a pizza thing that you shove in, it's very thin, and this was rectangular, and those 8 loaves were sitting there. Well, she put the wet cloth on top of them, and they didn't rise. They rose a little. The yeast didn't rise enough. And after 3 days, she didn't want to waste all that time and effort, and the anemic-looking Hefeklöße were sitting there, and she put that in the oven. And then when she took them out, they were anemic and small. But I wanted them so bad, and she made that vanilla sauce, and I ate them, my 2. I ate them, and this is what happened. They started to rise inside my stomach.
That's possible?
It's possible. The yeast started to rise, and I was in such pain, they rushed me to the hospital, and they had to pump my stomach to get rid of the yeast that was still growing in these stupid yeast cakes. And I thought I was going to die, although they said it was not a big deal.
That's like a nightmare scenario that you tell a child's going to happen, but you don't think it's real.
Yes.
If you eat that, it's going to grow in your stomach.
So as I was getting older, I never had that again. We never wanted to take a chance. And nor was that recipe passed down to my wife, who I actually knew when I was 18 and left the house nobody wanted to go down that road. And my mother well, she's dead now, but my mother, up until she died, always felt that was her biggest failure in life.
Oh.
So almost killing the whole family with yeast cakes that never rose except when you ate them.
Well, I guess it was just once.
So that's my story on that.
Did your wife ever get the chance to try that? Since you
No, she's not a German. She's more Irish. She's British and Irish. So the British are not known for any food at all.
Fish and chips.
Fish and chips. And the Irish, even worse, no food except Guinness and
Potatoes.
and
shepherd's pie.
Shepherd's pie. You couldn't get
Also fish and chips.
two cultures that have contributed less to the overall food industry than the Irish and the British, and then the Germans with 3 days of pork chops and Hefeklöße, and they make a great desserts, by the way. So the Germans can be patted on their backs because they know how to make German pastry.
Yeah, for sure.
And Italians, same thing. I don't know if the Irish make any desserts whatsoever. No, there's nothing that the Irish can point to as saying, gee, I can't wait to have that for dessert.
No. And even, you make your corned beef and cabbage for St. Patrick's Day, but that's not even really Irish. It's actually Jewish.
It's Jewish, right. So, and again, the Jewish kitchen is one that involves everyone coming over. My sister was Jewish, married a guy named Fleischacker, and they had, when you walked into her house, there was always a 50-cup pot of coffee at all hours. You could walk in there and there was always
dream.
coffee available because, once again, it is a community. The family invites the extended community. The Jewish community can't be tighter. The Italian community can't be tighter. It even plays out in the way, and I'm going to finish up now because we
have a meeting to get to.
We have a meeting to go to.
This is just our break.
But if you look at the way Germans make their exercise equipment, and Germans are great engineers, and Italians, the way they make their exercise equipment.
What is German exercise equipment?
Well, Germans make their engineers, so German cars and
Sure.
German machinery. Germans make ships and submarines, and their equipment, like any culture, they'll make a bike that you're on, whatever you call those pedal bikes. And,
yeah, an exercise bike.
An exercise bike. And Italians do the same thing. I got to believe that the Irish make some kind of exercise bike.
I don't know. We probably just use the Peloton like everyone else.
Well, like everyone else. But let me give you the difference between an Italian exercise bike and a German exercise bike. And this speaks volumes to the culture. So on an Italian, like a treadmill, you're on a treadmill and you say, okay, I'm going to slow down now. And it keeps going. The machinery keeps going until it finally stops, giving you a chance to, slow down naturally.
Right, ease into it.
Ease in. The weights on a bike will continue to rotate even though you've stopped pedaling, but it allows you to kind of cool down for a minute or two. Now, a German treadmill, the moment you say stop, it stops. You're almost thrown forward because it doesn't give you an inch of leeway. A German bike, the moment you stop pedaling, it stops moving. The weights stop in your tracks. You have to keep pushing. The moment you want to start exercising again, you got to push that thing. It's not moving. It just stops. And so my recommendation is, if you're into exercise, you get Italian equipment because it's so forgiving and loving, and you almost don't have to work. It just keeps going. So, all right, that's on that note.
Do you have a joke for today that you wanted to share with the group?
Yeah,
you don't have any notes.
I don't. I always wanted to words to live by, and today's words to live by are. Let me pull this up.
I like that. We could do a joke segment or a words to live by.
Well, like the early bird catches the worm, but it's the second mouse that gets the cheese. And if you
that's good. That's good.
so
I like it, and it goes with our theme.
and it goes with our theme. So all right, on that note, we're going to close out episode 2. Thanks for listening, and next week we'll come up with a more gripping, and we might go into what's streaming now on the various streaming networks.
I like it, and what we're watching.
And what we're watching, and what is it always death and killing, or do you go in for the more the epic stories? Right.
Oh, yeah, epic or
rom-com
heartwarming,
stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
That's
this
a wrap.
Has been Coffee Break.
Thank you, Mary.